I can see people are still joining in, so we'll give 3 more minutes. This is a message for all participants. We are waiting for people who are joining in. So I can see people are still joining in, so we give 1 more minute. There are participants on YouTube also that we won't know from here. Ganeshan sir, YouTube, it says waiting for Komeshwaran. Yeah. Okay. 30. We give 2 more minutes. This is a message for all participants. We are waiting for people to log in because I can see this. People are still logging in and the numbers are going up. So we're waiting. We're about to start in a couple of minutes. Okay. We have 30 plus participants, 33 now. So, okay, let's make a start. Uh, Good evening, everyone. To all the participants, good evening, everyone. Good evening to the panelists and moderator, and as well as our host, Mr. Ganeshan, and my colleague, Dr. Mahesh, who is one of the coordinators also. So I welcome you all for this interesting talk or panel discussion on technology addiction or digital wellness. So I'll just give you some ground rules. There is a Q&A section if you look at the bottom of your screen, and please post your questions in the Q&A section, and next to the question please put your name and your place of work or place, so we can identify you. And in the chat box you are welcome to give your comments, anything you want to say, including feedback of how this event is going, anything for the next event that you want to suggest, and all that. So with this minor introduction, I'll hand it over to Dr. Subhrata. Okay, I need to give you introduction about Dr. Subhrata. She's a professor and a head in Subaya Medical College in Shimoga, and she's a practicing and a famous psychiatrist in Shimoga. And she's also, as you know, she's a very good dancer, and also done a lot of creative work, and also a prolific writer. So with this small introduction about Dr. Subhrata, I'll hand over, and request her to take over this session. Over to you, Dr. Subhrata.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay, sir. Yeah. Warm welcome to all the panelists and Dr. Vijay, Dr. Mahesh, and I think Dr. Jagdisha sir has not joined, who's also one of the backbone of this program. A very briefly before I start the introduction for this, this Tele Arogya series has been running for many weeks actually. I have been personally able to attend these programs, and very informative, great faculty people, and we have had great interaction. So this has been, I think, the brainchild of Dr. Jagdisha, Dr. Mahesh Gada, and Dr. Vijay Kumar sir. And definitely Ganeshan from the Micro have been very supportive in conducting this. And here we are today in conducting a Tele Arogya series program with a very renowned faculty on digital wellness. So indeed, over recent years, technology has weaved its way into the fabric of our everyday lives at a very unprecedented rate. And though most of us would now struggle to imagine a life without technology or without internet, without smartphones, is there a real threat of addiction to these technologies? And that's exactly what we are trying to discuss today in the next few minutes. So without wasting much time in introduction, because we have renowned faculty for today's program, I would like to introduce today's panelists. Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma, the professor of clinical psychology with more than 2 decades of experience at one of the international premier institute, NIMHANS, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. He is credited to start India's first technological tech de-addiction clinic, Shut Clinic, service for healthy use of technology. I think it's a very proud feeling for all of us to know that he is one of the very renowned expert in this area in the whole of Asia. And he's the expert member for World Health Organization on addictive behavior. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Manoj, sir. And the second panelist for today is Dr. Avinash D'Souza, consultant psychiatrist and a psychotherapist from Mumbai. He's also a research associate at Department of Psychiatry, LTM Medical College, and he's the founder trustee of D'Souza Foundation Trust that works exactly in the area of mental health promotion awareness across all sectors. And the other interesting thing for me in his CV was that he's one of the psychiatrists, one of the very few psychiatrists who has a master's in counseling and psychotherapy and has MPhil in applied psychology. So a very warm welcome to you also, sir. So let us start the main, the center of attraction. Let us go to Dr. Professor Manoj Kumar Sharma, sir, for his talk on this.
Good evening and thank you, Shubhrata. And thank you for the team for inviting me for this today's talk. Basically, technology is a part and parcel of our lifestyle, but over the time, what the changes have come, like technology has become like a leisure activity also. Now we start conceiving it like a digital leisure activities. So as and when people feel bored, as and when they feel an opportunity, or they want to enjoy their time, the technology become one of the mean to spend time as well as to work on other things also. So when it becoming a leisure activity, definitely it's impact the usage pattern of technology as well as start affecting the day-to-day functioning also. So when I'm saying the usage pattern, the most commonest thing which we are saying now currently is called binge watching. I think all of us are familiar, like sometime all of us do engage in watching various shows or online series. And as the time permits, and if you are free, then I think sometimes it's become once you finish one series, it goes to the next series, and sometimes just time goes off. And people do complaints of that. Sometimes they spend few hours together in watching this various show series. So I think that when the criteria wise, if we see it, if person watch around more than 2 shows in one go or more than 120 minutes in one sitting, criteria wise, then you are fulfilling the criteria of binge watching. Especially if I would look at into in terms of cases which we see with binge watching, the particular case which we reported as well as published also, this particular person he was a professional, but he got like very unstructured daily schedule also, and most of the time he used to work from home. And as and when time used to permit, he used to watch show series, and slowly he developed a preference for watching this show series, and he started spending 4 to 5 hours, and then which subsequently increased to 6 to 7 hours per day, and which started affecting his daily schedule as well as other activities of his daily life. And he also complained of that this because his binge watching, it started affecting his occupational ability, start affecting his interaction, and he also developed a craving. I think most time we used to report craving also for watching this show series. So this is the example where I think because of availability of time and because of other reasons, people do start watching various show series. So this is one aspect of excessive use of technology. Second thing comes like some of the people do also report that they have if they are not carrying their mobile phone with them, they have a fear or they have anxiety that today I'm not carrying my mobile phone, and their mind remain preoccupied with the mobile phone, which we generally relate it with the phenomena of nomophobia, like no mobile fear. And you people, the person experience anxiety because he or she is not carrying his or her mobile with them. And the excessive use do also manifest as like a syndrome called phantom vibration syndrome, which manifests like a pseudo vibration of the mobile phone. Sometimes we keep checking our mobile phone with the anticipation something has come on my mobile phone. But generally we find that nothing would be there on the mobile phone, and it's like every time people feel distracted because of this anticipation. If these things are happening, then we say the person is developing, this is called phantom vibration syndrome. And another habit which has come is called because of excessive use and because of social media, and as well as we also bank on number of likes and all, is the use of selfie. And nowadays, I think though selfie is not a part of diagnostic category, but American Psychiatric Association has given certain criteria also to understand whether your selfie use is in the normal range or not. So this is like if you take 1 or 2 selfie per day, then it's a normal behavior. But if you take 3 to 4 selfie per day, it's an acute problem. But if you are taking more than 5 selfie per day, then definitely you have to work on your selfie use. And because of all these activities, the things which is developing is called digital burnout. I think this is the now commonest terminology which we are seeing because of excessive use, digital burnout or Zoom fatigue. And I think we may have sometime in the near future webinar fatigue also. Because I think the fatigue also comes up because you have to constantly look into the screen. And if you're looking at the screen, paying focus attentions, it also affects your physical functions, and sometimes it also brings a lot of physical fatigueness also. So this is another concern, because sometimes people may not meet the criteria of addictive use, but they may meet the criteria of physical fatigue because of excessive use of screen, and which is a concern among the professionals also, those who do not have any other use of technology, but because of their work related issues, they are excessively using the screen. So all these things, because of technology and because of leisure and because of our preference, we are prone to develop various kind of syndrome because of excessive use. So is everybody is developing addiction? I think that's a generally the most commonest question which we want to know. So basically we go with the criteria, like 3 criteria which we use for whether the person has developed addiction or not. One is preoccupation with the technology use, like whether you have a constant craving, desire to be with the technology. If that is there, that's become first yes in your towards the addictive use. Then the second is loss of control. Do you have a control when you are using your technology? But if you feel that you generally lose your control whenever you start doing anything, you don't know when to log out, or whenever you feel a desire to log out, you always push the decision and you always say after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it's become half an hour, or sometimes it takes 30 or more than hours together. So if that is happening, that's manifest as a loss of control, which is the second criteria towards the addictive use. The third is use despite knowledge of harm. You know that it is affecting your lifestyle, it is affecting your sleep, it is affecting your other domain, but still you continue your use. So if all these 3 things are happening, then we say you are developing addictive use of technology. But if you have any one of them, then we say that you may be in the category of excessive use or problematic use. The another way to screen this technology use, which we use at NIMHANS, is called 5C criteria, which you can also use in your daily setting. The first C stands for craving, and each C has to be answered in yes and no. So first C stands for craving, means the continuous desire or need to be on technology. If the answer is yes, that's become first yes in your lifestyle. Second is loss of control. If you have again loss of control, that's become second yes. Third is coping. Are you using technology as a method of coping? Coping could be for negative emotions, and sometimes technology is also used to experience positive emotions also. Like sometimes people are on the social media because they feel we get connected, and sometimes children are on the online platform because they feel their need for affiliation, because they feel there is nobody to play around, there is nobody to play because everybody is busy with the studies or with the other things, so they don't have anybody to play or to interact. Second, if they feel the need for acknowledgement, they feel that parents or the people around them do not acknowledge their talent. They are more judgmental, they are more focused on academic related issues, and that's why they always they remain critical, and which leads to a lot of communication issues in the family context as well as with others in the environment. So they again feel that need for acknowledgement gets more fulfilled in the online platforms. So if these things are there, then definitely it could be a coping initially, it could be a method to experience positive emotion, which may subsequently become a reason for excessive use. The fourth C is compulsion. Has it become like a compulsive habit for you that you have to use it? Like sometime all of us do check our mobile phones 70 to 80 times per day. This is a minimum, like sometime for professional purpose, sometime for non-professional purpose, because you are free, that's why you are checking your mobile phone. So you can automatically, you can see, like if you're checking your mobile phone 80 times per day, so it means if you're spending 1 minute per day, 1 minute per checking it, you are going to lose 80 minutes. If you're spending 2 minutes, it's almost become 160, and depend upon how much time you spend each time when you check your mobile phone. So it proportionately, it leads to a lot of productive hours goes in accessing this mobile phone or accessing various online platforms. And the last C stand for consequences. So because of these things, are you developing consequences in your lifestyle? So out of 5C, if you have 4 or all the 5, then again it indicates that you are developing excessive or problematic use of technology. So then the need comes that if I am a professional, am I addict? That's generally people are that, even if the researchers or even if people who are in the clinical setting or in the non-clinical setting, they also have a question that we spend hours together in front of the screen. Are we addict? So then the main criteria which goes is related with the concept of loss of control. Like if you have a control, whenever you feel like you can log out, whenever the demands come from the environment, you can easily log out, then you are not into that category of problematic to addictive use of technology. But if you have a problem in inability to log out, then definitely you comes into the category of addictive or problematic use of technology use. Another concept which we generally like to highlight is most of us do also have a habit of sleeping with the mobile phone, sleeping with the online devices. Because sometimes we feel like it is like similar kind of rationale. The alcohol user also report. They say, I am productive throughout the day. I am doing everything for my family. There is nothing wrong if I enjoy 1 or 2 drinks per day. So similar logic are used here also. Like people say, if I'm productive whole day, there is nothing wrong if I watch show series in the night time. And sometimes once you start show series, you don't know when you are going to sleep. So generally we have seen people who sleep with the mobile phone, they automatically almost they lose 60 to 90 minutes of their sleep. And if there is a delay of 60 to 90 minutes, then definitely it has an impact on their other day functioning also. So these are the various reasons for excessive use, and as well as for addictive or assessment for addictive use. Then comes what are my reasons are. So broadly, the reasons are like 24 into 7 accessibility. As I told, sometimes online platforms also do provides a lot of opportunity for disinhibition, because we can express anything on the platform. There is no control. So sometimes people feel, I just want to live the way, I just want to enjoy my activity the way I want to enjoy, and the online platform is the modality which I can, which provides me that modality and that platform. So sometimes the need for disinhibition also puts them for excessive use. Sometimes need for novelty and thrill seeking also is the need, which sometimes people puts the people in excessive use. Or it could be the other reason like loneliness, boredom, depression. These are sometimes could be the reason for excessive use of technology. Or sometimes because of excessive use of technology, person develops anxiety, sometimes person develop mood issues or may other issues also. So these psychological reasons are can become the reasons for excessive use, or because of excessive use you may develop all these psychological issues also. So but sometime in some of the cases we have seen like person who are living alone, like especially if I want to tell like people who are into the various use of social media or any other online platform, they say like, or in the like if you say dating sites and other things have come, which also provide them the temporary pleasure and the novelty. And they feel once they are back to the home, there is nobody to talk, there is nobody to interact, and it gives them the feeling of loneliness and boredom. And this online platform is the only modality to feel good, and that's why they are into the various online platform. And sometimes since it is fulfilling their psychological needs, it's become also the reason for excessive use also. So all these factor, if you feel that you have only one of these kind of these issues, and definitely there is a need for to work on these issues. So then the next question comes like how to work on it. So definitely the first thing comes with the individual decision is the acknowledgement. Like person has to acknowledge that I have excessive use of technology, and because of technology my daily lifestyle is getting affected. Because of my technology my other day-to-day functionings are affecting. Then once you acknowledge, then the next step is to take action. Actions can be in different form. One is to schedule your use. Schedule basically means like sometimes we also recommend that every half an hour use of every half an hour 30 minutes use of screen, take a break. If you take a break after 30 minutes of use of screen, it will improve your physical health, it will improve your physical feeling of well-being. And the break can include blink your eyes 10 times, move your head forward, backward 5 times each, move your head right and left 5 times each, as well as move your wrist clockwise and anti-clockwise at least 5 times each. So that's become one thing. Second thing, like most of us also have a habit of using earphone, though definite finding have not come in terms of effects of long hours of use of headphone on physical health. But the recommendation is every 45 minutes of headphone use, you must take a 10 to 15-minute breaks to give yourself a feeling of well-being. Third recommendation which has come especially for children is from World Health Organization guidelines, like especially children below 5 years, more play activities should be encouraged. The WHO recommend 90 to 180 minutes physical activity per day and less than 1 hours of screen use, especially for this kind of children. And they recommend that this 1 hour use should be very qualitative screen use, where parents can sit with them, parents can tell them what to do and how to use the various screen as well as online based activities. Then the next things come like all of us should also bring at least 30 to 40 minutes physical activity in our daily lifestyle. And subsequent to that, I think somewhere we also recommend that we have to plan somewhere what we call internet fasting. Internet fasting is a terminology where I think we have to schedule certain hours of our day-to-day life without internet, and those hours of the day should be used for other offline based activities. It could be in forms of interacting with the family members, it could be some offline activities for individual level, or it could be anything which can give you the platforms to improve your recreational activities as well as other leisure activities. Because in this context I want to give one example, like in one of the family which came to our clinic, so which we found during our clinic assessment that the whole family is not spending good quality time with each other. So we advised them that why don't you spend 1 hour per day, and during that 1 hour spend some time with each other and engage yourself in some activities. So family agreed that they will definitely spend 1 hour every day, and after 1 week they again came back for the follow-up session. And during follow-up session, the family include 4 members, father, mother, and the 2 children. And the whole family reported that they spent 1 hour together, but they don't know what to do during this 1 hour. They were finding it very difficult to spend that 1 hour. Otherwise, all of them have a 3 to 4 hours use of screen every day. But that 1 hour was very difficult job for them to spend together. So it means somewhere the family, the people who are in the family have to make effort so that they can understand each other. That's why I think the most of the adolescents feel that parents are not understanding them. Parents are not listening to them. So that's why we recommend most of the parents have more communication, and communication should be non-judgmental communication. They should not object that what they are doing. They should understand that why the child is doing XYZ activities, and without being judgmental, they should advise positive things. Second thing, the whole all parents should exercise is care. Sometimes all children do experience or do indulge in various kind of online activities which the parent doesn't like, especially one of the case, I think sometimes parents also do require a lot of cyber literacy, because one of the parents approached me and called me that their 9-year-old girl, because most of the parents are not familiar with which kind of like antivirus, which kind of control measure they have to adopt. So this parent was very much became worried when their 9-year-old girl typed some adult content on the YouTube, and they said that they, when their 9-year-old girl is typing this adult content on YouTube, what are its implications? Is my child is developing any kind of deviant behavior, or is she has developing any kind of personality or any kind other kinds of issues? So we have to spend a lot of time with this family to reduce their anxiety and to tell them that sometime there could be a peer pressure, or sometimes there could be a lot of anxiety in the child himself or herself, which allow them, which makes them to search for various kind of terminology which the parents find very offensive. And especially in this context, one more case I want to discuss, that this girl has come with the issue of the parent has a concern that girl is accessing various adult content, and they feel that my child, and this is a girl, and how can the girls can adult access the adult content. And when we, and they say that she has developed a addiction to pornography, but when we interviewed this girl, we found that she doesn't have that preference for watching this pornography or adults material. But what was the things has come out through the assessment is that there is, through peer group discussions, she developed a lot of anxiety about various sexual issues. And since most of the family doesn't discuss this kind of issues in their family context, and as well as the school also doesn't discuss this kind of issues, that this girl start accessing various kinds of adults platforms to understand these kind of concern. So sometimes this could be, was a very simple case, and it took a lot of time for us to educate the family members as well as to help them to discuss this kind of issues also with the young children, so that they do not feel a need to go use various online platform for this kind of purpose also. And along with that, I think ShutClinic has also evolved a one app also called Digital Detox app, which is available freely, and which also people can use if they want to understand their users pattern, if they want to understand what are the self-help strategies they can use, as well as various other strategies to manage their mood states also. That's another thing which they can do. And the last advice which goes for healthy use of technology, at least 30 to 40 minutes before sleeping time, avoid use of online activities, avoid use of mobile phone, so that you can have a good sleep and you can become a good role model for younger people in your families also. Thank you.
Thank you,
Now I
sir.
will invite Dr. Avinash.
Yes, I think Dr. Avinash D'Souza will take over.
Well, good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. Am I audible? I think yes, I am audible.
Yes, sir, you're
okay,
audible.
okay. To just start off, since our seminar was on digital wellness, and I think we have a mixed group seeing us. We have a medical group as well as a non-medical group seeing us. A few points that I would want to raise is that while we do talk about addiction and its various forms that may be seen in digital media, it's very important that people also realize that one has to go and look at the root cause as to why these addictions come up. And I think one of the main reasons why people get hooked on to digital media is because of various shortages in their day-to-day life. So you have sometimes somebody with an underlying depression that may take to digital media as a solace. You have someone with exam failure and low self-esteem that may take to digital media as a solace. You may have a girl who probably does not have peers and is introverted and may find her happiness on social media. You may also have sometimes people who accidentally or incidentally start using Netflix or any other platforms where there are movies, and at times then get hooked onto it because they find that the movies are equally captivating. It's a huge debate whether behavioral addictions are actually addictions, as people may say, it's a part of day-to-day life today. And the huge debate is whether we are pathologizing everyday life, or whether this is actually a disorder that we're looking at. Now, most people that come to me, children, adolescents, adults with these issues, very often have some underlying problem. So there is an underlying depression, there's an underlying need for love, there's an underlying need for affection, there's an underlying need for care, there's an underlying need for communication, there's an underlying need to be wanted, which has to be addressed. There is sometimes even a need to escape from reality, which people use the internet for. So we have to get to the root cause of what these issues are. So if you ask me, I mean, I really don't follow maybe a textbook-based classification, but I can tell both the common man and the doctors who are listening to us that, you know, according to me, we see various forms of these issues in practice. So you may see some people who are addicted to various chat rooms and social media, and they constantly look for affirmation from social media. So they die and they thrive to see that they get a huge number of likes for every post that they put. They get a huge number of views for every video that they post. And I think the lockdown has also made a lot of people, you know, use social media more, because that's probably been the only medium of being communication and connecting with people. So we can't say it's pathological, but it's come up as a result of certain environmental factors. On one hand, we've also seen a number of teenagers and young adults who are compulsive online shoppers. So they have to constantly shop online, and there's a need that I have to buy something. And online shopping also gives you the added benefit of returning it back in a fixed period of time. So they have that tendency also. We also see people, of course, who are addicted to pornography and sexual activity online, which is a very serious issue, particularly because many marriages are on the brink of breaking because of this. We have many young adults whose portrayal of sexuality in their minds get affected because of this, and that needs to be addressed. We also see a huge number of people who are now addicted to web series and Netflix and Amazon Prime and there is this compulsive nature to finish a series before anyone else finishes, so that they can probably post on social media about it or brag to their friends about it or talk about it. And the series are itself so captivating that one might sometimes, you know, not want to give up on, you know, seeing what the next episode is. So they are made that way. We also see a number of people who probably now are, you know, the selfie addiction is something which was already spoken about. It was a big fad at one time. Today, it's become a part of our day-to-day life. So I think taking a selfie is no longer looked at being abnormal or a fad, but it's very normal. But I think there are people who are, you know, posting selfies of themselves again and again, and that obsessive compulsive nature of that behavior is something which has come up. One important facet which has also come up now is the TikTok addiction that we see a large number of people, you know, getting addicted to, and the constant need for being liked and affirmed on TikTok. And we have some people, the more intellectual kind, who also have Twitter addiction. They have to tweet, and there is compulsive tweeting that they have to do for, you know, anything that they see. We are also seeing a surge in people who are dating online. So we have dating apps like Tinder, and we have people who are on these apps and are constantly looking for partners and mates online. So this is something which has also come up. So this is the whole gamut of the behavioral addictions. One facet of digital media which we have missed is young children who also are compulsively watching a large number of cartoons, which is also very important. And we see, we have cartoon channels which are 24 hours. So we see a huge number of children who are seeing cartoons. And invariably, I get parents who come to me and say, you know, are the cartoons going to harm them? Are the cartoons going to make their behavior change? And is there going to be a problem? So that's what we often see. Now, the key facet which people have to understand is that digital media is here to stay. We can't do without it. Digital media is going to remain. It can't go anywhere. We rather have to teach children to use digital media successfully. We have to teach them to use it rationally. So when I go to various schools in Mumbai and talk to children, we have workshops on rational digital media use, which is taught to them right from the 5th standard. A lot of people feel that children who are will probably go to social media post the 8th standard. But what not many people know is there are a large number of children in the 5th, 6th, 7th standards, or even the 4th, who are already on Instagram. And I must tell a lot of the senior professionals here that Facebook is meant for older people like us. The younger generation is more on Instagram. And so we have to know Instagram well. So Instagram safety is our target when we go to school, because a lot of events that happen on Instagram. And Snapchat is another chat box which is used a lot by students because it gets deleted. So there's no trace left. And parents are probably not even aware that Snapchat and Viber and other chat boxes exist. So that's something which I feel is what we need to look at. We also need to speak to children about not divulging personal information online. We need to speak to children about how the internet sites and syncing their Google accounts and syncing their Facebook accounts can often lead to them getting tricked by the internet when it comes to shopping and when it comes to other activities that they do online, and that they are constantly being monitored. It's also very important that we have to teach children what to upload and what to download and what they shouldn't, because that, I think, is a very important facet. With regard to screen time, I think this is always a battle that is going to be there. And currently, in the current scenario, I think that battle is even more there, because we are going to have children and adolescents who have 5 hours of online schooling, following which they will want to probably be part of a gaming schedule where they would want to play the usual 2 to 3 hour gaming. So children are going to be 6 to 8 hours online, 5 hours courtesy education, which we can't deprive them of, and 2 or 3 hours because that's the usual social media use which is there. And the whole debate is always whether it is good or it is bad. I think the precautions, yes, have to be taken. Children have to be taught what to do and what not to do. I think adults also have to be taught. Families have to be particular, and I think family members have to get together and decide, okay, post 10 p.m., we won't be on a gadget. There will be face-to-face communication. You won't go to sleep with your gadgets. That's of course there. But most importantly, I think what's also to be told is that families have to tell each other that you have to start communicating on the breakfast table. No gadgets when you're eating, no gadgets when you're talking. No family communication will happen on a WhatsApp group. Family communication has to happen face to face, which is very important. And I think parents and children will talk to each other rather than message each other. That is something that has to be taught, because I think very often when you message, the entire meaning, the emotion laden behind the message gets construed, which I think is lost when you express it, very verbally and openly. So that's a very important facet there that has to be taught. People often ask me that, they bring their child and they tell them that, there are a lot of newer games which have come up, which are quite aggressive. You have games like Hitman, you have games like PUBG, which have come up, and you have this video game fascination, which is there in the youth. So I think we are seeing a number of cases of psychiatric issues arising due to PUBG, particularly because I think PUBG is a game that involves a lot of fantasy, and children absorb those characters, and very often they get into that character role so much that they may even go into a psychosis-like phenomenon and may need treatment. We have children who get aggressive because they play aggressive video games. So parents need to monitor that. Apart from knowing about they must know what their children are doing online. That is important. They must know who their children's online friends are. They must also understand that, yes, you can't deprive the child of playing video games, but you have to monitor what are the kinds of games he's playing. You have to monitor the kinds of activities he's doing online. Another point I want to make is that it's very normal for these behaviors to happen. So what parents have to also realize is that they can't overreact. So if you sometimes walk in and you see your teenage son or daughter seeing a pornographic image or seeing a pornographic video, please don't slap him, or please don't hit him, and please don't, shout at him. Realize that this is a very normal part of sexual development. Earlier, people used to probably see movies and they used to probably see magazines, and today the era is of pornography being available online. So it's going to happen. Most of us on the WhatsApp groups that we are encounter adult content, though we don't want to see it because it's forwarded. So I think adult content reaches anyone's phone very easily, even without him not wanting to see it, it reaches. And human tendency to see it is always there. So you do tend to, watch it and look at it. So I think we have to realize that it's very normal. If children profess love to an adolescent, professes love to another adolescent online, parents have to learn to handle that just like they would handle any other love affair. I always tell parents that digital love will happen. It's a part of normal development. So again, because dating sites are there, all marriages are happening online, and dating sites are there. So this is all a part of normal development. What's I think very important is, as a society, for digital wellness, we need to equip our elders digitally, which I think is one of the needs that we have realized in the current COVID pandemic, that a lot of our elders were, paralyzed because they didn't know how to use digital media. So I think the younger generation has to work with elders and probably, equip them with basic digital media use, because our forum is digital wellness. So that's why this is something that I am, bringing up. And it's also very essential that I think parents and children need to sit together and talk about digital media, which doesn't happen. I will give you a very simple example. I have a son who's in the 7th standard, and he has 4 hours or 5 hours of online uh, schooling, which is happening. And after that, he probably for an hour or two wants to do gaming. So he always says that with 1 or 2 hours of gaming, you say, eyes would get spoiled and don't overuse it. But when I'm 5 hours of schooling, you don't say it. So, so why is, the divide there? And what we have to understand is that it's normal to get digital. We are going to get digital more and more. We are on a platform even today, which is digital. So digitalization is a part of our life. We can't change it. We're going to get more and more digital as time comes. Everything is going to happen online. But the key thing is, let's not forget that while digital wellness is important, let us not forget that we are humans. Let us not forget that we are beings that are emotional. Let us not forget to share those emotions, express those emotions. Though currently we are not permitted, let us not forget to, hug each other, touch each other, embrace each other, and express the emotions that we feel. Because it's probably, and never to forget, it is we who made the digital world. Let the digital world not rule us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Manoj Sharma and Dr. Avinash. I think we have a lot to discuss. We have many more questions, which I think needs to be answered. That was a very brief presentation from both of you. So we have a question. Let us start with the question. Dr. J. Shastri has a question. Being online is a new normal. So how do we get accustomed to it, and what is the actual normal usage? How do we define the normal usage?
Okay. I would like to say here that there is no normal usage, if you ask me. I mean, there may be guidelines, but they aren't followed. There are rules and regulations, but they aren't followed. So I personally feel, as long as you feel you're able to balance your personal life, your professional life, your family life, your online and offline time, and you're able to remain sane, and you're able to manage these things, I think that is the key to understanding, hours of usage. So what's very important to understand is that for example, as doctors, I mean, today we are seeing a number of patients through video consult. So we are probably online for larger amounts of time than we ever were. Now that is normal for now. So, but so if you tell me, no, you can't use the computer or the mobile for more than 3 hours, it's not going to be feasible in current times. Maybe in other times, yes, when we are seeing patients in physical presence, we would be off the mobile and probably come back to the mobile later. So our time would be reduced. So we have to move with the times. We rather have to move, as time goes. And there is no normal, I mean, I think here, the key thing is, as long as it doesn't affect us physically, mentally, doesn't affect our eyes, we take all the precautions, and we're able to manage human touch and human life along with being online, I think that's fair enough.
Yes. Thank you, sir. The second question is from Dr. Prarthana Yadav from Mumbai. So how do you see the fear of missing out, FOMO, as there are many things going on in social media, and also how do we overcome this? I think this is for Professor Manoj Sharma.
The fear of missing out something is a parcel of online technology use. It will be there. The first thing I think we have to accept that it will be there. But since it will be there, we also have to understand is it affecting me? The question of each person has to answer, is it affecting me? If the answer is yes, then there is a need to identify how is it affecting me. And Once you identify all these things, then you have to plan or schedule your uses so that you can reduce these dysfunctions because of excessive use of, because of fear of missing out something. But always keeps balancing, keeps increasing various engagement in leisure activities in day-to-day life, so that definitely it will have an impact on your fear of missing out something else.
Okay. Uh, this is for Dr. Avinash. Can this be the problematic usage? Can it be an flag for an underlying psychological problem?
Well, definitely, I agree, because when we look at underlying problematic usage, I mean, there's always an underlying psychopathology that does exist. So, like I mentioned, sometimes depression could be a cause, sometimes the need for affection could be a cause, sometimes some trauma that you've undergone could be a cause, sometimes it could be a component of conduct problems that you see in children, sometimes it could just be a part of wanting to go into a fantasy world where no one knows you. So and sometimes the fact that online no one recognizes you and there's this anonymity is something which is, you know, very important. I think something which one of the early papers by Suller referred it to as the online disinhibition effect, which, you know, was there. So this is something which I think comes in, and so you have to look at why he's going online. You know, what is the need? So there's sometimes lack of support from family, and the fact that a lot of people tell me, I go online because my friends understand me, my parents don't understand me. So you have to look at, you know, what is these underlying psychopathology and treat that. I mean, we don't really have specific treatments in the sense medication wise specific treatments for behavioral addictions. The treatments are behavioral. We have other treatments also. But the thing is, we have to look at underlying psychopathology and treat it while we also treat the behavioral addiction side by side.
Okay. Sir, I have a question as a psychiatrist working in a community setup and district headquarters. So the question I want answer from both of you, because one person is an institute, like the other person is into a private practice. So I would love to know the answer from both of you. A mother gets a child with a child or an adolescent with a problematic internet use. So how do you diagnose it? How do you diagnose it?
Okay, I think let Dr. Manoj start. Yeah.
Yes.
I think whenever child comes with these issues, so the first thing is to develop a communication with the child, communication with the family, so that we can understand what does the family think about this issue, as well as what is the child perspective is. Because most of the children comes with the answer that I am okay, I can manage my academics. Sometimes children also say 50-60% is also okay for me. And after 12th only, I have to prepare for my career. My parents are worried about me. And he said there is a peer pressure. So I have to, but I am balancing my academic demand as well as other things. But the parent has different kind of thing. Like parents feel that he or she is always on the technology. So we have to communicate with both with the parents as well as with the child. Second thing, we have to understand their reasons and the family issues also, or the family dynamic also, the type of disciplining and the other parenting practices are happening in the family context. Then subsequently, generally in most of our cases, we do not bring initial technology reduction as a first goal. We first work on lifestyle changes where child is also motivated. Sometimes it's easy to tell the child that why don't you regularize your sleep and reduce somewhere your technology. Child become very cooperative, like let's okay, I'm willing to reduce my technology use during night time. And sometimes it is also okay to tell them that while they are doing studies, avoid seeing WhatsApp, avoid seeing social media and all if educational materials are not coming on online platform. Because some studies have also shown that whenever we check our mobile phone and WhatsApp activities while doing any focus attention activities, it disturbs our concentration level, and the brain generally takes 3 to 5 minutes to reach back the same concentration level. So sometimes adolescents also have a concern that I read for a few hours together, but my productivity is not as good as I expect. And the parents also have the same issues. So sometimes simple behavioral suggestions works wonder for the children and brings a lot of good family communication in the family context.
Okay.
I think that.
Dr.
Yeah,
Avinash.
I think one of the things which I would like to say here is that I, rarely would, say want to be in a hurry to diagnose, problematic internet use. I rather look at it as internet use which is excessive, and I would try and work in behaviorally and also find out if there are any other comorbidities. So whether we're seeing ADHD, whether we're seeing conduct problems, whether we're seeing issues in academics, whether the child has a learning disability. I mean, these are all things which I would want to rule out simultaneously. And if we are seeing internet use which is problematic, I tell them that the entire family has to lead by example. So if the child is going to be not allowed a phone, is not going to be allowed gadget use, I think the parents will also have to be off gadget and generate some amount of activity which the child will find interesting. So I think if that happens, then automatically the need for other interventions reduce. And because very often the parents say, I have to have my phone because I get work related messages and I get work related emails. But if you're able to detox yourself and detox the entire family together, I think it works. So that is something which then the child automatically realizes, okay, no one is on the gadget, so I also have to probably be there. One of the things I always tell people in the family is that you keep all your phones and gadgets in the center of the table. The first person to pick it up will do up all the beds next morning and do all the dishes next morning. So in order to prevent that, they sometimes probably will not pick up their gadgets and wait for the first person to do it. And I tell the mother, anyway you pick it up first if no one picks it up, because that's anyway going to be your job and you're going to do it, so it's absolutely fine. But if whichever of your child picks it up first has to help you in household chores, and children don't want to do that, so they very often then get a little particular. So these are small behavioral things we do. I also talk to children, tell them about try and judge how much they know about the internet, tell them about various things about the internet and explain to them. And then they probably do realize, once you talk to them well and explain to them, and we tell them that, okay, if there's a certain amount of work that has to be done daily, if that is completed, then you will get your internet time. But if it's not done, then you won't get it. So it's as clear as that.
Yes. Dr. N. Pfizer, the question from him is the drug of choice for compulsive porno addiction. I think that for Dr. Avinash.
Okay. Well, I think again, it depends on what the underlying pathology is. So if it's depression, then I would go with an SSRI or an SNRI. If we find it's a conduct aspect, then I would go with risperidone or aripiprazole. If you find that there's aggression and there's pornography addiction with it, then either a low dose anti-epileptic like sodium valproate or oxcarbazepine combined with a low dose risperidone is something I would look at. If I find there's a sexual disorder that has led to the pornography addiction, so then you need to treat the premature ejaculation or the erectile dysfunction or whatever is a sexual disorder that exists in the adult. You need to also find out the type of pornography usage. It's very important because there are a number of people who probably may be into child pornography. There may be people who may be into deviant sexual activity pornography. So you need to find out what is the area of interest when it comes to pornography usage, and then look at whether any deviances exists, and you may need to treat that. Sometimes they may not show, or they may not have a paraphilia, but there may be paraphilic behavior which is linked to pornography. So you need to look at that angle also. So I think based on that, your treatment would be holistic. And of course, you would generally even assess for any other comorbidities on and treat that as well.
Basically, we would not have a drug of choice as such directly for porn addiction. No. Would it basically what the underlying psychopathology the child or the adolescent or adult have? Okay, we have a question by Dr. J. Shastri. If a child or any adult resists change of so-called problem use, any strategies to handle such behavior? Probably this is for Dr. Manoj Sharma. I would also like to add whether the patient or the adult or child doesn't want to come to a mental health professional. So how do you handle that together?
Basically, whenever any adolescent comes, there is a lot of resistance on the part of adolescent to seek help. So as we understand, it's always external locus of control because parents want. That's why the child is in the treatment center. So first thing, I think for a parent, I think I would advise 2C approach. One is communication, second is care. They should communicate more to the child so that they can understand the child, they can understand his or her needs, as well as they should show care toward the child so that the child feels that they are looking towards his or her welfare, his or her well-being, so that child feel more comfortable in discussing a lot of issues which he or she is not finding comfortable to discuss with anybody in the family or in the environment. That's a thing which the parents can do, but it will take time, and sometimes we have to also accept that sometimes there would be a resistance because it's not the child problem. It's like all his friends are also online, and all his friends are doing a lot of communication online only, and sometimes he may become a odd man out if he doesn't engage in those kind of communication. So parents also have to understand and sit with the child, how do they want the child to behave, and in case child has any perspective, they can understand the child perspective as well as they can advise them in the needful way, so that rapport remains good between the parent and child. There would be no resistance. Even if there is a resistance, it will come down. And same thing happens with the in the clinic setting also. We have to give space to the child, we have to understand the child. So generally we avoid giving any advice in the first few sessions. Only contract is to allow him to come to you, come to see the mental health professional. Sometime if he doesn't want to come, we ourselves makes a call and ask, check for his well-being. The child feel confident there is somebody who cares for me. So if this kind of approach is there, then the child feel comfortable again with the clinic setting also, as well as with the therapist or with the professional, and he start opening up about his or her issues, which may be related with the technology or which may be the reason for excessive use of technology. So that's a different issue.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Ketaki, who is a psychologist by profession. In his own words, I come across a lot of students, even today's geriatric population is being addicted to the technology, and controlling students is at times manageable, but for geriatric population it becomes difficult to manage. And I think this question is for Dr. Avinash.
Well, I think what's very important here is that in the geriatric population, there are mainly 2 or 3 forms of addiction that you may see if it comes up. One is social media or WhatsApp usage. Some older people take to Twitter and then compulsively are on Twitter. And I think at the most, you may see some of them into gaming. Now, the kind of gaming they indulge in is probably poker or card games or puzzle games and other games which are different from the games that adolescents would engage in. Now, it's very important to look at the psychosocial framework of the geriatric person involved. So, is he lonely? Does he have enough companions? Does he have social support? Is he in a old age home setting versus a family setting? Is there an element of maltreatment by his family members? I won't say abuse here, but I'll say maltreatment, whereby he prefers to be on his own and enjoy himself with his phone. So that's something which I would want to see. Sometimes it can also happen that this is a whole new area of exploration for the senior citizen. So when he comes into this area, he's very fascinated by the entire thing, and he might want to go online. So you need to explore all that. And I always say this, that if you have somebody who's 65 plus and he is enjoying himself online, not doing the wrong things, and managing his physical health and well-being, I mean, why should we stop him from doing something that keeps him happy?
Probably also it can add to the cognitive exercise too. Probably.
Yes, it may definitely.
Yes. Yeah, a question from Prarthana Yadav. Can we trace by online usage if someone is under mental illness by the kind of content one posts, so that help is availed on time? And what signs do we look for? Basically, it's about the posts which are put up in the social media.
See, one of the things, what people don't realize is very often they post for one person, but the whole world sees it. That's what invariably happens. So WhatsApp DPs are changed for one person to see who doesn't see it. And the whole world realizes, you're upset, you're sad, you're angry. And so I always tell people that, yes, based on their posts, based on their statuses, based on what they comment, you can definitely know about their mental health. What people also should know is that there are a huge number of mental health apps that, assess your movement, that assess uh, uh, the time when the phone is not used. So you come to know how much usage is there and how much usage is not there. They have devices on the phone that can track your heart rate and multiple other physiological parameters, and they come to know about your well-being, mental and physical, both. So these are things also which are being done. So definitely, yes, you can come to know on the basis of that.
Okay. This is for Dr. Manoj. Question Deepak Kumar Giri. What is the appropriate age for starting online classes for the child? And seeing here, schools have started online classes from standard 1.
So I think as far as NIMAI's advisory goes, and based on World Health Organization advice or recommendation, as well as American Pediatric Association also, both these agencies have recommended not more than 1 hour's online use for children's. So we also go with the same advice, like uh, that use should not be more than 1 hour. I think the encouragement should be more on play-based activities, which can enable them to learn various academic matter, as well as can give them the scope to enjoy the activities also. But there is no strict. Beside this, we do not have any much empirical evidence to say with confidence that how many hours are safe for children.
I think adding to that, being a psychiatrist myself and a mother of two young boys, a 5-year-old and 7-year-old, I am always worried about the online usage as well as missing out on something which other children might be actually getting it through the online classes. I think drawing a line is very difficult. I mean, probably the minister, the education minister is going to give a verdict today or tomorrow in Karnataka, at least in Karnataka, whatever is online education is going to happen. One of the, I think this is about my own friend. Actually, I know that he has a lot of social anxiety. And previously, which he would avoid going for a webinar, going for a seminar. Now he's very comfortable doing a webinar. And actually, he did very well. So what is a positive perspective? Do we have a positive perspective for this from the point of view of a social anxiety person?
I think I would like to tell, like, this definitely is like also become a coping, where the person who's feeling socially anxious finds a safe modality where he or she can express himself. But if it is working well for them, it's a good thing. But one of the case which we found, like, person who was socially anxious also became anxious about the comment she received on the online platforms. And the way she dealt with this online comment is to change the social media accounts. Every time, whenever she used to get this negative comment, she used to change the platform. So it became another. So somewhere we found that it may be which was social anxiety earlier, it became a virtual anxiety for her because of social media platforms. So it depends on person to person as well as on other psychological factors also.
Dr. Avinash, you're...
Well, I think one of the things is that social media definitely, when you look at social anxiety, when I'm on a webinar, I really don't see the audience. Okay, I see myself and I see the 3 or 4 of you all who I'm very comfortable with. So it's very easy for me to say what I want to say. I also know no one can really catch my throat and trouble me so much, when I'm on a webinar, and I have that added advantage of logging off if I feel anxious. So even if I'm, an anxious person, I mean, while another speaker speaks, I can shut my video off, take care of my anxiety and come back. So that is something which I can do, which you can't probably do when you're on stage. And also what I think happens is the fact that there are a number of people who I know do very well, as teachers, when they're not in a crowd on an online platform, but they might sometimes have a huge difficulty when it comes to controlling a classroom. And the one main advantage of, I think, a webinar facility is that you do it from the comfort of your home, so the environment is not threatening, which also is there. Whereas if you look at social anxiety, one of the main reasons why it comes up is the stage, the crowd, the ambience, the fact that I'm going to be speaking to so many people. And when I enter that arena, that's when my anxiety starts. But here, I mean, I'm in my hall, bedroom, home, I know my family is around me. I have water with me. I have everything with me. I have nothing to worry, and I'm doing it from home. So there's no worry at all. So that's a big advantage for relieving my social anxiety.
But on the other hand, I would think as a person, outgoing person like me, I don't find very comfortable speaking in a webinar because you don't have the input from the audience.
Well, I agree. I agree. But the thing is, I mean, I think there are a large number of, webinars wherein, the speakers, and I have done these webinars where I, as a speaker, have had the chat room open, and have had a webinar which is only Q&A. We've not had any lecture given, so we've had questions pouring in for 2 hours, and I've been only answering questions, and there have been people I know, so I address them by name. There are people who I don't know, and we've asked them, you can even put your video on and answer. So it's been interactive, so you can make the webinar interactive if you want. You can keep it a total only Q&A session. You may not have lectures at all.
And the other way to make it interactive is not having PowerPoints, I think, which we have done it right today. Both speakers have been very nice in that. We have a question. I don't know whether it is directly related to this today's topic by Prarthana Yadav. Do we know how if a child is depressed? I think.
Well, I think
very briefly, if you can answer.
I think my simple dictum as a child psychiatrist is a child not liking what he used to like otherwise is the first sign, of feeling depressed. So you give him ice cream. He says, I don't want ice cream. Otherwise he would die to have ice cream. Or, you tell him, please see your cartoon, or please play on the gadget. And he said, I don't want to play with. So, and you tell him, go down and play, or you tell him, come, okay, let's, today I'm going to make your favorite noodles. And, I don't want noodles. I mean, this is the first sign. I would worry. Why? I would, tickle him, make him laugh, and he doesn't laugh. I would worry. Why? Being mischievous doesn't worry me. Being, naughty doesn't worry me. Being chirpy and bubbly and over talkative doesn't worry me. It's an under talkative child that you need to look at. It's and one I'll take 10 seconds more. If you work in schools like I do, I think what I have done throughout my career as a school psychiatrist, and I still do, is I walk the entire school in the lunch break, and I speak to children who are sitting alone and having their lunch, and I ask them, why are you sitting alone? Why aren't you on the playground? And then very often I realize that, and I tell the counselor, no, please go to standard so-and-so and, find out about this boy. I think he needs help. And they'll very often say, sir, he has a family issue and there's this. And that's how we catch depression early and treat it.
I think that's why you are a very successful psychiatrist associated with, I think, 20-30 schools in Mumbai. Yes, I think we'll go to the last two questions for both of you. This is a message for all the YouTube audience, parents like me or public who are actually worried about the internet usage or the technology usage. So what is the right kind of usage in the terms of time, duration, and kind of like, what is the physical posture or vision related to that? So what is the right kind and what age? I think that's something both of you can tell us. And
start with Dr. Manoj.
Consult a mental health professional.
I think it's a very big question and answer may not be straightforward also. But as long as they can maintain a balance of their offline and online activities, that will be the best way out. And if I'm saying offline activities, their sleep, their communication, their occupational demand, their physical activities. And along with that, whenever, like if we have already discussed half an hour use or later 40 minutes screen use, take a break. If this kind of digital based healthy activities, if they can bring in their lifestyle, I think their use will remain in the healthy domain. And it's not like for adults. If the adults practice, they can become a good role model for the younger children as well as for others also. But in terms of age-wise, still I think this question has to be answered at what age would be the right age to give the mobile phone to the child, because sometimes parents regret that they have given the mobile phone at very early age to the child. But I think still we have to develop evidence. But as far as advice goes with the World Health Organization, I think maybe I think more you can delay, maybe after 5 years, up to 5 years, they have not recommended screen use more than 1 hour. And later period, they also said it should be more judicious use. So I think they can always discuss with the young children and how much to use and when to give the any devices to the children, depend upon their needs and all.
Well, I think, this is a very interesting question, and I always been asked this, what is the right age to give the child a smartphone? When I started working 2 decades ago, I used to say, give it to the age of 18, don't give it before that. Then I brought the age down slowly, as I gained experience, and it came down to around 14 at one stage. Now I become very diplomatic. I tell people, I think when you feel he can handle the phone, give the phone. And when you feel you can monitor it, and when you feel your parenting is strong enough that nothing will go wrong, then give the phone. So I said there's no fixed age, because I've had parents of 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds who say he has to travel 1 hour to school and back, so he has to have a phone to be communicating to us, or he has to go for tuition, so he has to have a phone to be communicating with us, because the driver takes him or somebody else takes him, so he needs to have a phone to just communicate. Well, then give him a phone that's only a communicative tool. You need not give him a smartphone. So so that's something which is there. But at the same time, I will also say one thing with regard to the internet usage is that the biggest message that I will tell people is that we have to learn to detox. We have to learn to realize that there is more to life than just the internet. There's more to life than just digital media. We have the trees, we have the sun, we have the moon, we have the stars. I always tell people who come to me is that, when was the last time you went on your terrace in the building and, looked at the stars and the moon with your children? And they say, no, we don't remember. So I said, you should do that. In a city like Bombay, I tell them, when did you take your children last and show them, animals? We have a zoo, which may not be the world's best, but we have a zoo. When did you go there last? When did you go last, and showed them how milk is removed from a cow? Or, how, for that matter, identify birds that come into your building? And they said, no, we haven't done it. I said, when was the last time you took them to a garden and made them chase butterflies and catch butterflies and put butterflies in a jar? We have butterflies in Bombay, but no one has the time to go and run after them. So I said, you should, do these things. So it's only when you do these things that you will realize that there's more to life than just, I always tell parents that when children are called home to play, it is strictly non-digital play. So, the children have to go down and play, or they have to, they can tumble, they can roll on a bed, they can do whatever they want, play hide and seek, do all that they want. You have to make sure they have space to play. But see that they are not on 4 different gadgets playing a video game or competing online. That is something that shouldn't be done. So I think that's my message.
I said it was last question, but I'm really amazed by the experience and expertise of both of our faculty people. So last question, nothing gets completed during this Corona times without the mention of COVID. So do you think COVID time has increased the attendance in your digital detox clinic? I mean, has it increased the problem?
Definitely, concern has come for increased use of technology across all age group, whether it is children, whether it is teenagers or among adults. And most of the concerns have been in relation to disturbance in their psychosocial functioning, because the whole day goes in a very unstructured way. Either it is in the online activities, food get postponed, physical activities, there is no physical activities. Sometimes whole family watch together till late night hours. And since parents are watching, they can't say children to avoid it. So, and subsequent to that, I think people who already have a tendency for excessive use before pre-lockdown period also, these people have shown increased use also, and that become more concern for the parents and other family members also, and they want immediate, like, what to do with this kind of clients. So sometimes it become like a questions, because in the COVID environment, very difficult to engage, and the users say, I don't have anything to enjoy, let me enjoy. And in case if they stop it, then again a lot of behavioral issue comes up, which again family find it very taxing to manage it. This become a very big concerns during COVID time. And but we work with the family to improve, work on their control as well as work with their relaxation, because we teach family relaxation, because until unless we promote their mental health, they will not be able to take a good care of the adolescent other family member. So we works with the family predominantly as well as with the adolescent and the other users also.
Well, my take here would be that more than excessive usage during COVID, what's very important is the kind of media they are consuming. So they shouldn't be consuming a lot of negative media and negative COVID news, and a lot of pessimistic news that is floating around. They have to be looking at optimistic things when they look online. We cannot prevent them from going online because probably that's the only major source of solace they have in the current scenario. But what's very important is we monitor what they go and do online. So if there are people who are tending to move towards pornography usage, they stop that. If there are people who are tending to get compulsive when it comes to movie viewing, they stop that. But what's very important is do not get onto WhatsApp groups that promote negative information about COVID. And please make sure that you spread the right information. So don't just forward without thinking. Forward very sensibly. There are sites where you can go and check the authenticity of the news. And once you do that, then you can probably forward it. And I would say, I think I think spread positivity. Spread a lot of positive, emotions through social media. That is something I would tell people. So if you're on it, you might as well use it to bring smiles rather than bring sorrow.
Thank you for such an extensive and elaborate presentation, Dr. Avinash D'Souza and Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma. I think to conclude, it's very much normal to become digital, and it is here to stay. I mean, digital. We are going to be digital in everything, and the only thing is we teach ourselves and we teach our children to use it very rationally. And the digital police will not flag us when we have met our technology threshold. That is when we need to understand. We should have a confidence to know when we have reached the threshold. And I think the communication, care, and the most important thing is role modeling for children. Preaching might not be great. I think practicing is what is very important from all of us. I think that was a great talk by both of them. And Tele Arogya series have been continuing for the last 2 months with wide variety of programs. That is when I think, these programs become very important. Sitting at home, having a webinar, you can listen to so many good people with the comfort of staying at your home. And that's how we use it. We use the digital technology very rationally. So today's session has been excellent with more than 45 viewers on our participants in our Zoom app. And we have had more number of users on YouTube channel too. And with more than, I think, 15, 20 questions for discussion from psychologists, psychiatrists, and the common people. So I thank Dr. Avinash D'Souza from Bombay and Mumbai, and Dr. Manoj Kumar Sharma from NIMHANS Bangalore for such a wonderful presentation. We still have a lot of questions unanswered. It's a box of Pandora box where I think we get a lot of questions, and we have both of them who have actually worked a lot in this area. So probably Arogya series will actually plan to have one more session on the same topic with the same panelists. I thank Dr. Vijay Kumar Haribishettar, Dr. Mahesh Gowda, and Dr. Jagdisha, and Mr. Ganeshan from Micro Labs for conducting this Tele Arogya series very successfully. And I thank all the participants and audience who have been who have participated very well. Thank you, one and all. Over to Dr. Vijay Kumar Haribishettar.
Thanks, Dr. Shumbrata, for moderating it so well. You've done all the things that's required. So anyway, thank you very much. And I'm sure with your kind of moderating you're doing, we'll invite you again and again in our sessions. Thank you very much. Mr. Ganeshan, thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Manoj Kumar, thank you very much. You always support me by accepting my request. Thank you. And Mr. Dr. Avinash D'Souza. We left where we met, in January, and
Right.
This was again a wonderful session. I'm sure this kind of, digital wellness will require a full CME, 3-day CME maybe. It's not just simple 1 hour, 1.5 hours program. I think it's a lot of things to be answered. Thank you very much, one and all. Shubhratri, everyone. Dr. Shubhrata, thank you again. Mr. Ganeshan, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, sir.
everyone. Shukran.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
In modeler.
Exit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.